Hello, everyone. This is Leilani Cawthon back talking to you with two new guests. This is the Learning Council podcast, and I wanted to say that our topic today is the importance of coherence in classrooms. I think this is a really viable, important thing to be talking about right now. So I have with me two new guests, Sari Factor, who is the Vice Chair and Chief Strategy Officer of Imagine Learning. And let me give a little detail about her. So Sari Factor is the Vice Chair and Chief Strategy Officer. She leads the company's vision to empower educators and students' potential through innovative digital-first learning solutions. She's a seasoned K-12 education solutions leader with over 40 years of experience. She is passionate about using technology to enhance and support teachers and to improve student engagement and learning outcomes. Thank you, Sari. And now Jason Fournier. Did I say that right, Jason?
You did.
Great. All right. So Senior Vice President, Product Design and AI, the fun stuff, right? So Jason is over design and AI. He architects Imagine Learning's enterprise-wide AI strategies to transform learning experience and empower teachers with streamlined workflows. I think this is going to be an important word. With over 20 years of experience navigating the complex intersection of technology and education, he specializes in making cutting-edge AI accessible and impactful in real classroom settings. This is also a very important topic. So let's get into this. So coherence is a really important thing to me right now because what I'm hearing in the market is that there's a lot of selective retirement of tools coming from the ed tech industry, and that's because the load on the teachers is so enormous. um, 100 logins, even if they have single sign-on, it's just too much to manage. And there's a need to sort of look at workflow. So the load has been traditionally all on the teacher. So Sari, welcome again.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's get started on this. Talk to me about what you mean by coherence.
Well, coherence is really the through line of what you're trying to teach K through 12. So across K-12, but even within a grade level, what you're trying to accomplish in terms of meeting the standards, ensuring that every student is participating and following along, and really with deep understanding of whatever the work is, whether it's mathematics, whether it's literacy, whether it's science, social sciences, social studies. It is that through line and making sure it all hangs together. What we see is the states and the districts who have chosen a high quality instructional materials
Mhm.
that are coherent, and they enforce the use of those materials. And what I mean by enforce is ensuring that teachers are well prepared to teach those materials. So the coherence really encompasses not only the curriculum, but how that curriculum is delivered and taught, how teachers are prepared to deliver that curriculum, and the learning experiences in the classroom that support meeting the standards. It's all pulled together in a way that supports student learning, so that you know what was taught before and you know what comes next. It's really important for teachers to understand that, because that's when it makes sense to students. And when we've been through a decade of teacher pay teachers and Pinterest, teachers pulling resources from across the internet, and that hasn't worked. And you referenced yourself all the different tools in the classroom.
Mhm.
One of the things that sometimes happens when you have a lot of those different tools is that classroom experience gets fragmented and
Yeah.
kids get confused. So what we want to do is avoid that fragmentation and build on coherence so that
Oh,
students
yeah.
are able to really understand what's happening.
Yeah, and I think also what you're really saying, and then I'm going to pull you in, Jason, is that the days of the administration putting together a curriculum map, which is essentially pinning the standards to time windows, and then going, maybe here's some playlist stuff, maybe you could use this if you kind of want to as a teacher, and then feeling like, okay, I'm empowering you as a teacher, go, move on with your bad self, right? Like, just here you go. That those days of like the teacher then having to find, sequence, make sense of against the standards, they're all by their lonesome, are kind of actually having to come to an end because you don't have what you were just talking about. You don't have coherence. You don't have any ability to know. exactly what am I doing at what time, da da da. If a kid moves from one school to another school in the district, there's no, continuity of action. There's really nothing. So I feel like what you're also saying is that there needs to be a formal going in from curriculum map directly into the lesson, right? Like not just going, here you go, kind of thing. Just I'm going to empower you, but really what I'm doing is handicapping you because now you have to do everything by yourself. Am
Right.
I?
And that was a lot of work on the teacher, a lot of
Yeah.
Yes.
work to pull things together. I mean, this in theory should be easier because that there's a cognitive load even for the teacher to try to pull everything together
Mhm.
and to
Oh
try to
yeah.
make sure that she's got that through line or he's got that through line that he's working towards. When it's in the curriculum materials as a foundation, teachers, of course, can build on that, but it really supports teachers in the creation of classroom learning experiences.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay, Jason, jump in on this. What is your comment?
Yeah, I agree with what Sari is saying, and I think the tooling that we build. I mean, one way that you can think about coherence in a real practical sense is something like representation. And so if we're thinking about how math is represented, we want that to be consistent in all the different places that a student sees it. If we're using a specific approach to teach them number lines or five frames, we want to have that be in all the places that the student is seeing it. So as Sari said, there's less cognitive load on the learner and they can connect the concepts more effectively. When you're mixing and matching materials from all over the place, that coherence doesn't exist. And that flows into things like pedagogy. Like we choose those representations for specific reasons and we build our lessons around them for specific learning science on specific learning science foundations. So the more consistent the curriculum, easier it is for the teacher to get comfortable with it, to rely on it, and then, as Sari said, to really create meaningful classroom learning experiences without having to invest extra effort in the assembly of the materials, the discovery of the materials, or even editing the materials to try to achieve that coherence themselves. So I think that's maybe my side of the coin is kind of the how do you think about that in a product sense when you implement, but I think they go together. Everything Sari said about the reason it's critical and important for teachers with then how does that flow down into the product experiences that we build.
Right, exactly. Well, you just went into some depth, right? Like if building a curriculum to be coherent is an onion, there's a lot of
Mhm.
layers,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
So when I think about this, I think about what school leaders need to hear because maybe they're, several years removed from the classroom and maybe they're only taught in one or two subjects, what those layers all are. Because you went into
Mhm.
the science of da, da, da. I know I've been talking to school districts, especially the K through 3, they talk a lot about don't do too many concepts in one week. There should be
Mhm.
practice days.
Mhm.
Part of that is absences.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to do every single day a new concept because if a kid's absent, they soon get behind, right?
Mhm.
And you need a lot of practice at that age, right? Like, so you introduce like addition, and then there's a couple days of practicing addition. Then an absence doesn't matter as much because it's homework, right? So there's a lot of depth to this. So coming back to you, and then I want to get into the AI conversation. Sorry, how would you explain all those layers of those onions? Because this is what you guys have to deal with. Like, what are all the standards for the state? How do we, put them against the whole plan? And then how do we go depth? And then how do we apply science and all of that?
Yeah, it really does start with the learning science. What does what we know about how kids learn? How do you bake that into a curriculum? That's fundamental. And then you look at the standards, and many states have different standards. We're
Right.
at the point where we have to kind of look at all 50 states and say, how does this state want to apply those standards? And then on top of that, what are the instructional moves? And learning science informs that. What are the instructional moves that we will be giving to the teacher to deliver that lesson, to create the classroom experience or the virtual experience, because we do have curriculum for virtual learning as well. What does that look like? What are the best practices? How do we ensure that we are, if implemented well, that the program will deliver better student outcomes. That's really what we're all about. So it's all those layers, foundationally, the science, and then the standards and the instructional moves. Assessment is a part of it. You need that. You need to see that students are understanding. So we have to
Yeah.
build assessment in, and there are many ways to do that. Some of it comes through classroom discussion and elaboration that the teacher is facilitating. Some of
Yeah.
it is, much more individual versus group. You've got the combination. So it's all of those things that get baked in to what we do that we believe will deliver student outcomes.
That's perfect. So, Jason, I'm going to turn this one over to you. So, there's a real attention on all those levels. She was just talking about, but there's also attention now on screen time learning. And I always try to divide that between passive and active, right? So, when
Mhm.
you're talking about, and then we'll get into the AI, I think, because I think that's going to be an important part of it, but there's passivity in a lot of what teachers are doing with screen time learning, and
Mhm.
it's just text. There's no even a lot of widgets and things to play with that to teach you math. So talk to me about that from your perspective, product creation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we take a very intentional approach around how we decide when and where to drive to screen time. And I think we're balancing a number of considerations. I think in a space like a classroom where Imagine IM is being used, the goal of that is to create a math community where kids are learning from each other, and they're making mistakes, and they're feeling comfortable making mistakes, and they're talking it out, and they're describing what they notice and what they wonder, and all of those things are about students interacting. So when you put them on a computer, in many instances, the software we're providing them with is now it's a single player experience, right? And that kind of takes away from some of that community we're trying to build. So you talked about practice earlier. We think about, can we use the technology to help with a practice experience? And I think we have products in that space. Our Imagine Plus Math experience, as an example, is a spot where students can engage in that practice. So it's really about, when do you use the technology with intentionality to achieve a specific learning outcome? And then when do you rely on the teacher facilitating a cohesive community experience with the students to help drive the learning experiences that we know matter for them? So that's how we think about it. It's really kind of calling your shots around which tools are the right tools to use at the right time for the right objective, and how, as Sari said, do we use the research and learning science to underpin the decisions that we're making in those spaces.
Exactly. And I think it gets really complicated for people because they're
Mm.
also dealing with mixed ability, right? So
Yep.
you have a student who needs second grade language and you're teaching fifth grade.
Yep.
And in math, there's a kid that just doesn't understand a certain fundamental numeracy, and he's in eighth grade. Or
Yep.
there's a foreign language difficulty. I think
Mhm.
that that burden is more severe than we're really talking about. And so teachers faced with triage, right? Like, so they're trying to teach to this group, and it isn't a group. It's 40% of it now by our numbers, Learning Council research numbers, is not on grade band. Some of them are ahead, right? Like they're
Yep.
just bored, so they're like going back to their phone because they're bored. And then others are just so far behind, they know they're hopeless. So they're like trying to create their own meaning by pulling out their phone under their desk, right? So this is a real issue. So we're here talking about the art of it all, right? Like
Mhm.
if you're going to use digital, this is what it can do. And one of the most majestic things it can do is always provide definitions, right? So as you're going through, it's like, what's that word? I don't get that word, poke, and then it pops up the definition. I know you guys are probably doing some of that stuff, but now you add AI over the top of it, you have a tutor. So, all that said, sorry, I'm going to pull you back in. Frame for me what Jason's going to start talking about with AI. So, what are the AI moves for Imagine Learning? Because I don't really know everything about your
Yeah, and
product.
I just want to comment on something you said, because
Okay.
back to the idea of coherence.
Oh,
Coherence becomes even more important when you have kids who are behind, kids who
yes.
have language differences, learning differences. That is even a bigger reason to ensure that you are working within a coherent environment. And that coherence for us, the way we talk about it, is curriculum informed AI. So that the AI, this is not some generic from the model makers or some generic version of AI. It is all within the pedagogical frame of the curriculum that the teacher is using. And I think that becomes very, very important because remember the through line, right? Kids might be on that through line, as you described. You might have a middle school student who's operating at the second, he's reading at the second grade level or math at the, third grade level. You need to be able to build those building blocks for them so that they can scaffold up as far as they can, even if they will still be behind at the end of, their sixth grade year.
Yeah. Yeah,
Jason,
but
how would
my
you
experience
characterize that?
is my experience is with like majestically formulated software like yours, you can do several grade levels. There's a way to speed that all up. In a year, I've seen that happen myself in a micro school down in Florida.
Well, it's as
So
much about supporting the teacher where those
yeah,
kids across those grade levels and the proficiency levels of each student as it is the student herself,
Yeah,
right? That's
right.
giving the teacher the tools, and that's is what technology can do. And actually, most of our technology is actually geared, and most of our AI is geared at the teacher right now to make sure she has the suggestions in the moment. These curriculum packages come with lots and lots of resources. But if the teacher can't quickly put her finger on the resource that she needs at the time, it's very difficult. But we could serve them up to her based on the insights we get about student learning, every individual student. We can furnish her with a new lesson on the fly. We can furnish her with, a little lesson, a mini lesson for these students who are way behind or these students who are English learners. Those are things that are accomplished very, very easily within the curriculum. You don't have to go outside to get it. And that's one of the
that's right.
things that we think is a hallmark of curriculum informed AI.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say just to add to that, I think in terms of um, AI experiences that are relevant, we've built tools that help teachers give feedback to students on writing. And that's a spot where you can tailor the feedback based on the level of the student's writing, but the AI is grounded in the learning science and our subject matter expertise around how feedback should be delivered to help a student's writing improve and what type of feedback is critical depending on where they are in that journey. What we see is that when teachers use that tool, students get feedback on average 30% faster, which keeps it more close to the development, the next draft that they're going to write, the next piece that they're going to write. So for us, it's about giving the teacher tools to help them be more efficient, to incorporate the right learning science, learning research, subject matter expertise in so it's easier for them, but to center them in the experience. We don't give that feedback directly to the learner. We give it to the teacher. And what we see is a lot of teachers customize it, even if it's just signing their name or giving a note of congratulations. Almost all the teachers who use that tool add a little customization, a little bit of flavor. So it's a mechanism for them to build rapport and relation with the student, but to give feedback that's grounded in best practice and that's meaningful. The other thing is, Sari mentioned at the top, the need for assessment and the way that assessment is kind of woven into these experiences. And so we're about to launch a capability this fall where we have a very short computer adaptive quiz for the student that focuses in on misconceptions around mathematical skills that the student might have. That
Mm,
will identify, to your point, the students who might be on level, the students who might be a little behind, the ones who are ahead. And then we're doing two things from there. We're giving the student some very, very targeted tutoring support around those misconceptions. This is not an open-ended general tutor. It specifically aims to help that student stay in the on-level material so that more students come to class ready to go for the next lesson. But then we're
mm,
taking those misconceptions and we're summarizing them for the teacher. And we're telling her, here are the areas where your students share misconceptions. Here are the outliers where there's some misconceptions that one or two students have. And here's some activities that you can do before class. Maybe you do a small group instruction table activity. Here's a 15-minute lesson plan that you can use for that. Here's some worksheets you might want to give kids to help them practice. And then here's how you should adjust your next in-class lesson to optimize for where your students are. All of that is done in that curriculum-informed AI way, where it's grounded in the curriculum the district has already adopted. And these are permutations and adjustments to that curriculum rather than wholesale new material that might not be aligned pedagogically or may not be aligned to what the teacher was taught in their PDPL around delivery. So, it's really this kind of story of how do you use data to inform the Gen AI capabilities? How do you ground the Gen AI capabilities in the curriculum? And then how do you help the teacher be more efficient through insights to drive actions in the classroom?
Excellent comments. I have two things.
Mhm.
First of all, I want to go back. So first of all, let me just say, so what you've just defined is what Learning Council has talked about in some of our reports is liquid curriculum. So you
Mm.
have a baseline, but it's liquid. It's moving on the grade bands itself. And it's altering in real time for the individual.
Yeah.
Not the baseline of the content, but the framing around it, which is excellent. That should be the design that all companies are looking at in the courseware business, the content business. But I want to go back to something, sorry, originated earlier, which is that you've captured an LLM, closed it. So you don't have it going out to open internet and some open LLM, anonymizing data, reframing it when it comes back in. You guys closed it, right? So is that right, Jason? Did you do it that way when you added it into Imagine Learning?
No, no. So I think the thing that we are balancing is the transferability of knowledge that the foundation models have against the context engineering to ground in the curriculum and the right evaluations, benchmarks, and guardrails to ensure factual responses, to ensure appropriate responses, and to make sure the system is responsible. We are using off the shelf technology for the foundation model layer, but where we are innovating is in that wraparound set of capabilities to
The
ensure
agent.
that
Yeah.
agents, but also, as I said, it's the evaluations and benchmarks to be able to measure and um, improve the results that you get, as well as the guardrails and the moderation that goes around that to ensure responsible use and safe experiences for kids and for teachers. So,
Mhm.
the trade off that I think companies need to make is it's very expensive to invest in training these LLMs from
Yeah.
scratch. Fine tuning them or otherwise altering the models for different use cases comes with its own pros and cons. Now you're committed to a
Right.
model and a set of improvements. And yet at the same time, we want them to be safe and reliable in the experiences we're building. And so we're balancing all of those things. And we think we have some unique approaches, but we are using foundation models like a lot of other providers in our space.
So you're using so essentially you built a super filter and then agents around a streaming LLM. Is it one LLM, multiple ones?
It's multiple because we choose the LLM that's appropriate for the task that we're completing. I mean,
That makes
when you talk
sense.
about agentic systems, you're often you're optimizing the model for the task at hand.
Yeah.
We do the same thing. And Sari, I mean, I think this is something you and I have talked a lot about.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is it is in the program. So within
Yes.
the tools that we give the teacher, it's baked right in. So
Excellent.
she can go right to a menu. She does not have to fire up ChatGPT or fire up Gemini to get at these tools. The tools are baked right in. And that's another thing. It's one less login, it's
Mhm.
one less I have to go someplace to use the AI enabled tools.
So
And
is that a tiered structure, Sarah? Because, when teachers think about AI right now, they think of that standalone tool, and the only continuity of that tool's knowledge is the thread, right? Like which chat am I going to choose? But when you're talking about being it baked in, are you running a back end data store so that you are accumulating on that individual against the LLM stream? Because when you're doing that, it remembers a different chat. So
Yeah, I think
those are two data stores.
yeah, what I would say is you can think of the foundation model in different ways. So, not to get super technical, but one kind of advancing concept right now is the idea of a harness. Like we're
Yes,
wrapping the model in something that is steerable, that's task built,
computer,
etc. And I think that what that signals is innovation in the interface layer around
right,
these tools. Most of what we've all seen so far are chatbot interfaces. I chat with it and I tell it what I want and it comes back, and then we have to dialogue and negotiate. And I would argue for many instructional tasks, that's an ineffective and inefficient way to interact with the intelligence layer. Like a teacher knows what they want. Like she goes to the tool because there's something she wants it to give her. And the more negotiation she has to go through, the more time spent. So we've
right.
spent a lot of time trying to innovate around how do you use the intelligence of the tool, but in some cases in a more on rails experience so that you're going to get a lesson plan that matches the template that you already are used to. You're going to get a set of math problems that, as we said earlier, have coherence with the other things you're doing. So I
Right.
think there are some chat experiences we've explored. PL and PD, professional learning opportunities, are one example of those. I'm going to deliver this lesson. What are some common misconceptions students might have? What are the typical gotchas I should be aware of? A teacher can ask that question and ground it in our PL material, and the curriculum will give them answers and tips on that. But we also have other experiences where it's not chat based. The memory, if you will, as you were describing, is actually the curriculum that underpins that. And
Okay.
that's what we're surfacing and providing.
Yeah, because I just know as a journalist myself, if I have a thread where I feed it some of our proprietary research and I want to build a paper around it or an article
Mhm.
around it, and say a bunch of stuff to it, if I open another thread, it doesn't remember anything that I talked about before.
Yeah,
Now,
that's right.
sometimes it will, and I don't know what the mechanism of that is, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like a giant mystery sandwich. But what you're talking about is you have your own data store of all your core, right? All your
Mhm.
curriculum, your
Yeah.
methodology, the frameworks of those, how they dish out, how they
Yeah.
distribute, all of that other kinds of stuff. And then you're filtering, you're probably anonymizing, going out and de-anonymizing, coming back in.
Mhm.
So essentially, you've built a workflow environment that is pre-knowledgeable. School districts probably don't have a big problem, putting it against their curriculum map or whatever they're doing in the district level, their portrait of a graduate, whatever they're trying to do. Can people also feed into that? Do you get asked that? I'm going to go back to you. Sorry. Do you get asked that where they want to feed you some baseline? Like,
We
here's my
have,
portrait of a
we
graduate.
haven't been asked a lot of that yet, I will tell you. But this has been developed in conjunction with educators. I mean,
Mhm.
Okay.
Jason and his team are talking continually with educators. They're observing classrooms. They're talking about what are the use cases that would be most valuable. And so ever since ChatGPT came to be birthed publicly, we've been working with teachers to understand what were the use cases that would be most valuable to them. What are the things that are going to save teachers the most time, that are going to ensure the most effectiveness in the classroom to drive the outcomes that we all see, right? Better student outcomes, better proficiency levels, no matter what teachers are teaching. So it's a collaborative effort, we believe. Jason could ask, are we doing anything yet that responds to an individual teacher who says, I want something that we haven't really
Yeah,
developed?
I mean, we provide a lot of opportunity for the teacher to steer the result, and so we haven't. I mean, we ingest the standards at the state level, and we use that
Okay.
as the backbone. We're not yet incorporating kind of district level content. That's something we've thought about, and maybe in our roadmap in the future. But what's important to us is that the context that's used is the teacher's context, the classroom context, and so we give them a lot of opportunities to kind of inject that into the different workflows that we've built. So yes, and as Sari said, we spend a lot of time with teachers through advisory boards, through classroom observation. We've done betas, like we do a lot of feedback gathering to make sure that they feel like the tools are steerable by them to get the results they're looking for.
Excellent. Well, I think we're also and I want both of you guys to come back to me with this sort of observation. I think we're also in a moment where the teacher mindset is often this human is in front of me, of the one of 30 I have in front of me, is entirely unique, and I need to do something for this entirely unique individual versus the form of the standards mapped to time and then the content laid over that. So you have like these train tracks with stations of steps and things like that, which is the viewpoint of builders, right? Like
Mhm.
we build this normative line and then we allow like it to sort of like have like little liquidity around it. But the mindset often in the schools and districts and teachers is so like, no, I'm going to be like my own self and as a teacher, and I'm going to customize everything, right? And it's all my art as a teacher. And I think that those two things are the real friction in the market. And if you look at what schools are doing, most of the leadership being former teachers is entirely of an empowerment mindset, right?
Mhm.
So the adoption of some normative path that allows that liquidity around it, it itself is a little bit of an alien thing, right? So talk to me about what you're really perceiving as schools go through this total, the friction of that, and also the attrition and the can't get enough teachers anyway. They're in a pressure cooker. So they're going to have to pick or choose between those two things. So sorry, talk to me about that first.
So I think, our goal is to empower the educator. We know that, she's got to direct that classroom. And yes, you are completely right when you say we've put so much pressure on teachers. We've seen the, retirements, the average teaching, I've read everything from 2 years to 5 years is the average teaching time. People go in, they go, oh, this is too much for me. I'm not doing it. We hope that as teachers gain expertise and feel more successful as teachers through using curriculum and tools like ours, they will stay in the profession longer because we know that it's a practice. And the more you work on that practice, that craft, the better you will be. We want to empower that. So our tools are really designed to help supercharge the teachers, the teacher's expertise
Right.
and help them to build it. I mean, that's why, and as Jason described, one of our applications is in professional learning. We want teachers to be able to query at any time, like, how is this lesson constructed and why? What is the real purpose of why we designed the curriculum the way we did? That becomes very, very important. When teachers understand that, it's much easier for them to teach and to modify in the moment themselves without even going to the computer. We want to encourage that. So, yes, we want them to have that flexibility, but at the same time, we want to give them the tools to enable that.
Yeah, it's a tough road because you have to convince the individual teacher to believe and accept and trust the science is there. And you've done all this little detail work and every little thing that is every little part of every curriculum, the whole thing, right? And they have to lean on it.
Yeah, and we have to recognize that many of the teachers coming in today, they haven't had the background, right?
Mm.
Emergency certificates and credentials. They don't have the, school of education background that many of us do. So we need to equip them as best we can, and our tools help to do that.
Yeah. All right, Jason, your comment.
I think I spent some time in higher education earlier in my career, and we would talk about academic freedom. And it's the same story here. How do we give teachers enough room to be creative and kind of bring their own experience to the table in ways that spark curiosity for kids and make connections across material? And at the same time, we need that through line, that foundation, so that all kids get good learning experiences and they're based on the science as Sari said. So it's a balance. And I think what we're trying to do is build the teacher's confidence in the baseline curriculum, help them
Yeah.
trust that it will help them achieve the learning goals they're driving at, but create space and capability for them to customize that in ways that make it theirs as they deliver it. Every classroom is unique, right? I mean, when you walk into them, you see a teacher's personality expressed in the signs and the
Mhm.
artifacts and the things that they hang and the lighting they put in and the carpets they drop on the floor. Like every teacher puts their stamp on the classroom. We want to enable that. Like we want that to be something that we all are excited about and enjoy about the learning experience. And yet you need some consistency to create measurability, to create consistency, to ensure that kids are getting a good experience. So we're trying to walk that line and kind of navigate that well.
Yeah, but there's a definite friction there. And
Hmm.
we're teaching humans. Like
Yep.
so it's hard because
Yes.
everyone is different and every little mind you have in front of you, it's very easy for a teacher to go, this is a unique nut, right? Like,
Yep.
how do I
Yep.
crack this one, right?
Yep.
And but force themselves to go lean on this normed path, right? So this is a hard sell. So I want to finish off this conversation. I'm going to come back to you. Sorry. The problem in ed tech right now is the complete confusion that AI is bringing and all of the other pressure things that are on their heads right now. And this push to have no screen time and the other things that are going on. This is hard. So I want to ask you what your challenge is. Like the challenge of ed tech right now, and I'm such a believer, right, is real. So what are your thoughts?
I think as a field, we have over-indexed on the tech part of ed tech and under-indexed on the end ed part of ed tech.
The human
Um,
side.
yeah, I mean, it is about education first and foremost. So when we look at using technology, it's how do we use it in a purposeful and intentional way? What are we using the technology for? And Jason described it very well earlier. It's like, what are the things that technology can uniquely do for the teacher or the student that can't be done easily offline? There are many, many things that are much better done offline than online.
Yeah,
Learning, I believe, is as a human and social experience. My best learning experiences were social ones. And you've got to examine those concepts as as part of groups. The technology can be a support, but it is only a tool. And I think we've gotten a little carried away as an industry, focused on the tech as being a silver bullet, which we've always known it was not. We've got to focus on the educational purpose underlying all of this.
yeah, I think more so now than ever before. In fact, and I'll come back to you on this one, Jason, is Learning Council has really been exploring the concept of what is human intelligence? How is it different than AI,
Yep.
right? That we've
Yep.
got this whole rewritten, what are the nine human intelligences? And we've got this whole five characteristics of what the human mind mechanically does different than AI. So I think that there's definitely that need to push up like the human side, like let's define it, let's cater to that kind of a thing because AI can do a lot more for us and we have to accept that, but we have to maneuver around it so that we're doing the things that make us compete with it. Jason, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think we've been spending a lot of time thinking about the purpose of education and where that needs to be changed or where it remains the same in the face of evolving technology. If you play out some of the scenarios we read about in the news, work could be incredibly disrupted and transformed through all of this
Mhm.
technology. Well, if one purpose of education is to prepare students for the workforce so they can provide for themselves and their families, how do we have to reshape that? And I think that's what you're asking in this human intelligence question
Yeah.
is what's unique to us and what's unique to the technology? What's the balance? I think there's the kind of now questions to your point about the pressure around education. And then there are the kind of middle and long-term horizon questions around how is this technology going to reshape society, reshape work? And that there's big questions there. I think the thing that I feel strongly about is we all need to engage in those questions. The model
Yes.
makers are not experts in education. They make general purpose technology that oftentimes subject matter experts are finding the edges around. So for us to ensure that this technology is well applied to the things that matter to us in education, our voices need to be present in that conversation. We need to be experimenting, having dialogue like this, challenging each other and challenging our worldviews and evolving to great applications of the tools, as Sari said, to the problems we have around helping kids achieve their learning goals and helping teachers create meaningful and powerful classroom experiences. So for me, I think you're asking the right question, and there's a lot to figure out. I don't have the answers, but it's something we think deeply about, and we've enjoyed having the opportunities like this to talk with folks like yourself who are digging in and kind of driving dialogue around these topics.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Last comment. Sorry, what do you have to say?
Yeah, we've been spending also a lot of time when we think about what it is kids need to learn on the durable skills. It's much more than just academic content. Your point of what makes us human, it's that ability to think critically, to communicate, to have empathy. These are the human aspects of our lives that and schooling that we need to teach much more intentionally than I think we often have. We've been so focused on content and academic content and skills. And even when you look at the standards, they're really talking about academic skills and not those human skills, the durable skills. Sometimes they're woven in the standards of mathematical practice or in science, some of the 3D, what can students actually do when they graduate? And so we want to think about ways that we can make that more evident and build student agency around that. Because we know that once kids graduate, they're
Mhm.
going to have that agency for themselves. So building that agency across their K-12 experience becomes very, very important. And so I think AI and technology can help us do that and can help inform teachers and students themselves about how they're doing on that journey.
Yes, I certainly agree. And I really believe that we have to have that conversation hardcore right now because there's two things that AI excels at the most right now, and that's math and language. And those are the two subjects we focus the most on and always have for the last, what, 150 years? Because we were building for a different age. We were building learning, and it's so concreted in now. We're building it for the industrial age, and that is no longer the age. We have to build, I really believe, a complete different subject map. And yet companies like you guys you're locked into what the expectation is in schools now, and they're not shifting the ball, right? And so just I'm just mentioning so that you help bring it up. And then they say to themselves, hey, so maybe we should talk about this, right? Like maybe we should be teaching other things and not just nice to haves like Portrait of a Graduate. Did we miss anything important to you? Stop and think for just a moment.
I might just riff on that last set of topics we talked about and say AI literacy is a kind of important concept because it takes some of those things about the durable skills and starts to frame them in that space you were describing around human intelligence. Um, and so I think what it means to be AI literate and what it means to be able to use the technology effectively, I think is an area that deserves a lot more discussion. And I think it connects to your point about how should we be reimagining education in the face of this technology. So I think you could kind of unpack that into a set of discussion topics there. But that's the one that's top of mind, just given where we ended.
Yeah, two things I would say. If you haven't read our Beyond the AI Inflection Point report, it's not even
This
really a
is
report, an initiative we co-sponsored with a group called AI for Education. Um, we gathered, Jason and I were involved in gathering about 20 big thought leaders in K-12 education.
good.
Um, and technology, and with a very intentional purpose of telling a story about a school district who was encountering AI beginning in 2023 and what happens through 2027. It was really inspired by the AI 2027 report, if you know what that is.
Mhm.
So you can go to beyondtheAIinflectionpoint.com and see the story there. It's we were meant to be provocative.
Oh,
And
good.
we included a lot of resources that schools and districts and any school community can use about encountering AI and how they think about that. It really poses a lot of challenging questions. And we were just at ASU GSV, and Jason and I helped to run a session with educators on some of the resources we used, which was really fun. So I would
Yeah, I missed
mention
it.
that.
Sorry about that.
And we're also doing that work around durable skills. A white paper is forthcoming, but we did do a convening on Portrait of a Graduate and where things fall down between that poster on the wall, the vision, and really implementation in the classroom. Just like adopting AI is a change for educators, or adopting a new curriculum is often a change, a big change in some ways for some educators. So is Portrait of a Graduate. And our findings are, without thoroughly integrating it, it just becomes a poster on the wall and an aspiration. You really have to begin to articulate, what does that mean for a curriculum? What does that mean for daily activity in the classroom? What does that mean for our assessment? How would we evaluate students' progress towards those Portrait of a Graduate competencies? So that's something that we are into and working through and trying to understand where it's working and where it's not, and what we could do as curriculum providers to enable it.
Yeah, we'll have to share with you. I have a book coming out on
Oh,
human
good.
intelligence, and Learning Council basically rewrote the Gartner Nine and the two earlier scientists that wrote those because they didn't align with full human abilities. They were focused on culture, which is not what humans do. Sometimes we have to look at a rock and consider its density and whether or not we can move it, right? Like, so
Yeah.
that's mass, that's not culture. So we reordered those, and then we found by a lot of research, we found the 5 characteristics of humans. People say, "Oh, it's critical thinking." Yeah, no. So you have to read that, right? Like, so I'll send you that, and then
Great.
there's a crosshatch of those two things that gives you uh, all of the indicators of demonstration of human intelligence, which is a very interesting thing. And then for you, Jason, we formed a group called the Omni AI Alliance because we're
Hmm.
already seeing districts that are capturing LLMs as the district's mind. Even schools are doing this. Lano ISD, LLANO ISD built their own. They're the first ones that I know of in Texas. And that means they take an LLM and then they hook all of their courseware, their LMS, SIS, financial HR into one so that they've got workflow agents they can cross create. So Omni AI is a rising thing that I'm trying to talk to people about. And we will have a national event on it in Miami
Okay.
there in November. It probably won't be that big because these are the forerunners, these are the
Yeah.
movers.
Yeah.
But I have several superintendents who are coming. They're bringing their CIOs, um, just to talk about this. And so they're some of the biggest districts in the country.
Yeah.
And that movement, I think, is going to be a major trend 2027, 2028. That's what Cisco's
Yeah.
predicting anyway. So
Hmm.
sorry, I'll make sure you get the book, and Jason, you
Great.
get the book too, and then I'll
Okay.
talk to you about the Omni because you need to be
Yeah.
involved. You definitely
Sure. That would
need
be
to.
great.
All right, so this has been super fun, Jason. Thank you for being with me.
Thanks.
Sorry. Thank you for being with me. This is your host, Leilani Cawthon, telling you to keep listening, keep learning. Thank you guys. Over and out.